The fire came down the ridge faster than anyone expected. 1 minute, it was a thin orange line moving through the dry brush above Bellwether Valley. The next, it was climbing through the manzanita, throwing sparks 30 feet into the air and pushing a wall of smoke toward the orchards below. Mara Ellis stood beside the county road with ash landing in her hair and watched 3 fire engines turn onto her property. "Where's the break?" the crew chief shouted. She pointed toward the western slope. "Past the old pump house. Follow the bare strip." He looked where she was pointing. Across the hillside was a wide, uneven band of ground almost completely stripped of dry grass and brush. It wasn't pretty. There were hoof marks, chewed branches, and patches of exposed soil. But there was almost nothing there to burn. The fire hit that strip 20 minutes later. It slowed. Not all at once. Not like someone had turned off a switch. The flames dropped lower, lost speed, and broke into smaller pockets. That gave the crews enough room to get in front of it. By midnight, the eastern orchards were still standing. By sunrise, people in Bellwether Valley were talking about the line that stopped the fire. They called it Mara's fire break. But Mara knew that wasn't exactly true. The goats had built it. 4 months earlier, nobody in Bellwether Valley had believed 42 unwanted goats could save anything. Least of all Mara. When her father died, he left her 60 acres of pear trees, a farmhouse with a cracked foundation, 2 tractors that started only when they felt like it, and enough debt to make the bank manager speak to her in a soft voice. The farm sat at the lower edge of California's Sierra foothills, where the land rose sharply behind the orchard into dry grass, oak scrub, and dense manzanita. Her father had called the upper slope the wall. Every summer, it turned brown before June. Every fall, the county sent notices reminding landowners to clear dead brush. Her father had done most of that work himself. He ran a mower where the ground was level and cut the rest by hand. After his knees got bad, he started hiring crews. The year before he died, clearing the slope had cost nearly $14,000. Mara had $986 in her checking account. The bank wanted 3 missed loan payments. The irrigation pump had started making a grinding noise, and the county notice on her kitchen table said she had 45 days to reduce the fire fuel on the western slope or face a fine. The first person who told her to sell was the bank manager. The second was her father's old equipment dealer. The third was Cole Brannigan. Brannigan owned a development company out of Sacramento. He wore clean boots, drove a silver pickup without a scratch on it, and had a habit of looking past people while they were talking. He came to the farm on a Tuesday morning and stood beside the packing shed with one hand in his pocket. "You've got a difficult property," he told her. "I've noticed. The orchard's underproducing. The irrigation system needs work. The upper acreage is a fire hazard. You've really done your homework." He smiled like she had complimented him. "I'm prepared to make things simple." He offered her less than half of what her father had once believed the farm was worth. Mara looked at the number and laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. Brannigan didn't seem offended. "You're not buying the orchard," she said. "You're buying the land. I'm buying risk. You're buying 60 acres beside the county access road." His expression changed for less than a second. That was when she understood that the road mattered. She didn't know why yet, but it mattered. "I'll think about it," she said. "You should," he replied. "Fire season is coming." After he left, Mara stood in the driveway and watched his truck disappear. Then she looked up at the western slope. The dry brush moved in the wind like fur. She had 43 days. She met Luis Ortega 2 days later at the feed store. Luis was 73, though nobody knew the exact number because he gave a different answer every time someone asked. He had a white mustache, a faded denim shirt, and the posture of a man who had spent most of his life walking behind animals. He was arguing with the store owner about fencing wire. Mara waited until he finished, then asked, "Do you know anybody who clears brush cheap?" Luis looked at her. "How cheap?" "Embarrassingly cheap." "What kind of ground?" "Steep, dry, manzanita, star thistle, poison oak, tall grass." He nodded slowly. "You need goats." She thought he was joking. He was not. "I don't need goats," she said. "I need the brush gone." "That is why you need goats." He told her about targeted grazing. Goats could eat plants machines couldn't reach. They could work steep slopes, move through rocky ground, and reduce dry fuel without spraying herbicide. "How many goats?" she asked. "For your hill, 100 would be good." "I can't afford 100 goats." "Then start with fewer." "I can't afford fewer goats." Luis scratched his cheek. "I know a man who needs to sell some." The man's name was Dean Pritchard. He had run a small vegetation management business 2 counties north until a highway contract fell through. Now he was selling his trailers, fencing equipment, and 42 goats. They were a mixed group. Some were old dairy does that no longer produced enough milk. Some were small Spanish cross goats nobody wanted for meat. 3 had crooked horns. 1 had a torn ear. Another had a permanent limp that did not stop her from climbing onto anything taller than a bucket. Pritchard wanted $6,000 for all of them. Mara had 986. Luis spoke to him in the quiet, patient tone of a man who had spent years bargaining over animals. By the end of the conversation, Pritchard agreed to take $800, an old orchard sprayer, and $200 after harvest. Mara stared at Luis. "That sprayer doesn't work." "Dean knows." "Then why does he want it?" "He thinks he can make it work." "Can he?" Luis shrugged. People need hope. Mara spent $800 on 42 goats and immediately regretted it. The goats arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a rusted livestock trailer. Within 10 minutes, 1 climbed onto the hood of her truck. Within 20, 2 escaped through a gap in the temporary fence. By sunset, 1 had eaten half the rosebush her mother planted beside the porch. Mara stood in the yard with a length of fencing in one hand and said, "This is the worst decision I have ever made." Luis, who was repairing a gate latch, said, "Too early to know." The first week was chaos. Mara divided the western slope into small grazing sections using portable electric netting. Luis taught her how to move the herd every few days so they would eat the brush without stripping the soil. The goats tested every fence. They leaned on it, crawled under it, jumped over it, and occasionally appeared to study it as a group. One afternoon, Mara found 6 of them inside the pear orchard eating young leaves. She chased them for 40 minutes. The neighbors watched from the road. Someone took a picture. By evening, the picture was posted at the feed store with the words, "New Orchard Crew," written underneath. Mara left it there. She was too tired to be embarrassed. Every morning, she checked the goats before sunrise. Every evening, she moved water, fixed fencing, counted animals, and wrote notes in a green notebook. Section 1. Heavy brush, moderate grass. Section 2. Dense manzanita, poor access. Section 3. Star thistle near orchard boundary. She took photographs before the goats entered each section and after they left. Luis told her she was doing too much. "I need to know if this works," she said. "You will see if it works. I want proof." He looked at her notebook. Proof is useful when people do not want to believe what they can see. The goats did not eat everything. That was the first thing Mara learned. They stripped leaves from lower branches. They ate young thistle, dry grass, poison oak, and the softer ends of manzanita. They trampled some of what they didn't eat. The second thing she learned was that timing mattered. Leave them too long, and they damaged the ground. Move them too soon, and they barely made a difference. The third thing she learned was that goats were not machines. They had preferences, grudges, habits, and strong opinions. The torn-ear doe hated rain. The limping one could open simple latches. A black and white wether named Otis refused to follow the herd unless Mara walked in front of him holding a bucket. 3 weeks into the project, a young doe caught her leg in the net fence and tore the skin above her hoof. Mara sat with the animal in the shade while Luis cleaned the wound. "This was supposed to be cheaper," she said. "It may be. It doesn't feel cheaper. No useful thing feels cheap while you are building it." Mara looked at him. "Do you practice saying things like that?" "No. You should stop." He smiled. At the end of 6 weeks, the first slope was nearly unrecognizable. Where there had been waist-high dry grass and thick brush, there was now a broken, patchy strip of low vegetation. Mara could walk through it without pushing branches away from her face. She took new photographs and placed them beside the old ones on the kitchen table. The difference was obvious. So was something else. The pear trees closest to the grazed slope looked better. For years, the ground above them had pulled water away during light rain. Now the trampled plant matter and manure were holding moisture in the soil. It wasn't dramatic. The trees didn't suddenly double in size, but the leaves were darker. The soil stayed damp longer, new weeds were softer and easier to manage. Luis stood beside her in the orchard and pressed his boot into the ground. "You are feeding the soil," he said. "I thought the goats were feeding themselves." Both can be true. That summer became the driest Bellwether Valley had seen in 19 years. By mid-June, the creek behind the Miller Vineyard was running at half its normal level. By July, 3 farms had stopped irrigating outer rows. The cost of brush clearing crews nearly doubled because every landowner wanted work done at the same time. Mara's goats kept eating. They cleared the western slope, then the land behind the pump house, then a strip along the county road. People stopped laughing when they drove past. They slowed down. A pear grower named Sam Wilkes came to the fence one morning and looked at the goats working through a patch of thistle. "How much do they charge?" he asked. "They don't." "You know what I mean?" Mara did know. "I haven't figured that out yet. I've got 8 acres behind my packing barn, too steep for the tractor." She looked at his truck. There were 3 bales of hay in the back. "I need winter feed." He followed her eyes. "How much?" 20 bales for 5 days. He laughed. 10, 18, 12, 15, and you provide water. He held out his hand. Deal. That was Mara's first grazing contract. She didn't call it a contract at the time. It was written on a page in her green notebook under the heading Sam. 15 bales. 5 days. Water included. Fence repair if damaged by his equipment. By August, the goats had worked on 6 properties. One family paid her with hay. Another gave her rolls of used electric netting. A vineyard owner repaired the orchard pump in exchange for 2 weeks of grazing. A beekeeper named Hannah Cho let Mara store equipment in an empty shed and began tracking which native flowers returned after the goats moved through. Mara still had almost no cash. But she had feed, fencing, labor, water access, and something she had not expected. She had people calling her before they called a contractor. Cole Brannigan returned on August 3rd. This time, he brought papers. He stood in Mara's kitchen and placed a new offer on the table. It was higher than the first. Still low, but high enough to make her look twice. "I understand you've started a small grazing operation," he said. "I have goats. I've seen them. So has everyone else." He glanced toward the western slope. "You've improved the fire condition. Thank you. It doesn't change the financial reality. What reality is that? You owe the bank. Your orchard needs investment. You're operating without county authorization to transport livestock for commercial vegetation management. Mara's hand stopped on the coffee cup. I move goats between private farms. For payment. Sometimes. That makes it commercial. She looked at him. You came all the way here to explain county paperwork? I came to improve my offer before someone else explains it less politely. There it was. Not a threat. Something cleaner than a threat. A warning made to sound like concern. Mara folded the papers and pushed them back. No. Brannigan did not touch them. You should read the number. I read it. Then you understand what I'm offering. Yes. And? No. He looked toward the window. From the kitchen, the county road was visible beyond the orchard. What do you think that road is going to become? Mara asked. He turned back to her. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you are. He smiled. You're tired, Miss Ellis. I am. Tired people make emotional decisions, and rich people call their decisions practical. The smile left his face. Only for a moment. Then it returned. Fire season has another 2 months, he said. Think carefully. 3 days later, Mara received a notice from the county. Her commercial livestock transport activity was suspended pending review. A complaint alleged that the goats were causing erosion, damaging native plants, and creating a public safety risk near county roads. She read the notice twice. Then she called Luis. He came over after dark and sat at the kitchen table while she paced. This is him, she said. Maybe. It is. Probably. He warned me. Yes. I should go to the county office tomorrow. Yes. I should call him first. No. She stopped pacing. Why not? Because he knows what he is doing. You do not yet. That's comforting. You need information before anger. The next morning, Mara went to the county planning office. The clerk gave her copies of the complaint. The complainant's name was withheld, but the documents referenced a consulting report prepared by a firm called Western Land Evaluation Group. Mara had never heard of it. Hannah Cho had. Her brother worked in commercial real estate. 2 days later, Hannah brought Mara a folder. Western Land Evaluation Group had prepared environmental reports for 3 Brannigan development projects. One of those projects involved a proposed emergency access corridor connecting the county road to a future housing development on the far side of Mara's property. The corridor was not approved, but if it was approved, the most direct route crossed the northern edge of Mara's land. Brannigan wasn't just buying an orchard. He was buying control of the road. Mara hired a lawyer named Sarah Keene. Sarah worked out of a small office above a pharmacy in Auburn and charged more per hour than Mara could comfortably think about. After listening to the story, Sarah said, "You need evidence. I have photographs. Good. I have grazing notes. Better. I have agreements with landowners. Written? Some. Write the rest." Mara spent the next 3 weeks building a case. Before and after photographs. Maps of every grazing section. Dates, animal counts, rainfall, soil condition, slope angle. Letters from farmers describing reduced brush. A statement from Hannah about returning native flowers. An invoice from the pump repair. A letter from the local fire captain saying the cleared strips could improve emergency access. Luis wrote a statement too. It was 3 pages long, all in block letters. At the bottom he wrote, "Goats do not cause poor management. Poor management causes poor management." Sarah read it twice. "I like him," she said. The county scheduled a hearing for September 17th. On September 12th, lightning struck the ridge north of Bellwether Valley. The fire started in dry grass at 2:14 in the afternoon. By 3, it had crossed 600 acres. The wind pushed it south, toward the orchards, toward the Miller vineyard, toward Mara's farm. Sheriff's deputies went door to door. Mara loaded her documents, 2 changes of clothes, and her father's watch into her truck. Then she and Luis moved the goats into the irrigated lower orchard. "You need to leave," Luis told her. "So do you." "I am leaving." "You're still here." "So are you." Smoke darkened the sky. The first fire engine arrived at 4:07. The crew chief studied a map on the hood of his truck. Mara showed him the cleared strips. "The western line runs almost half a mile," she said. "The goats finished it last week." "How wide?" "Between 60 and 90 feet. "What's above it?" "Manzanita and oak scrub." "What's below?" "Pear trees." He looked at the slope. "Can we get a truck through?" "Not all the way, but there's an old service trail along the lower edge." He called another crew over. Within minutes, firefighters were moving toward the grazed strip. The fire reached the ridge after sunset. It burned hard through the untouched brush. Then it hit the land the goats had cleared. The flames dropped. Crews used the opening to cut a wider line, lay hose, and burn out small pockets ahead of the main front. The fire still crossed in 2 places. It still scorched trees. It still burned an equipment shed on the Wilkes property and destroyed part of a fence line. But it did not run through the orchard. It did not reach the houses along Miller Road. And by morning, the southern edge was contained. The county hearing happened 5 days later. The room was full. Not because Mara had invited everyone. She had only told the farmers who had worked with her. They told other people. Sam Wilkes came. Hannah came. The vineyard owner who had repaired the pump came. 2 firefighters came in uniform. Luis sat beside Mara with his hands folded over his hat. Cole Brannigan sat across the room with an attorney and a man from Western Land Evaluation Group. The county panel opened with a complaint. Brannigan's consultant spoke about erosion risk, overgrazing, livestock escape, and potential damage to sensitive vegetation. He used careful language. He said possible. He said unverified. He said long-term concern. Then Sarah stood. She placed Mara's photographs on the table. She showed the grazing maps. She showed the soil records. She showed the landowner agreements and the fire captain's statement. Then she called the crew chief from the fire. He spoke plainly. "The grazed areas reduced available fuel," he said. "They gave us a place to work. Without those breaks, the fire would have reached the lower orchard faster." One of the county officials leaned forward. "Are you saying the goats stopped the fire?" "No," he said. "Firefighters stopped the fire. Weather helped. Terrain helped. The grazed strips helped. Anyone who tells you one thing stops a wildfire doesn't understand wildfire." He paused. "But those strips mattered." Sam Wilkes testified next. Then Hannah. Then Luis. Luis did not read his written statement. He looked directly at the panel. "You are asking if goats can damage land," he said. "Yes. So can tractors. So can cattle. So can people. So can fire. The question is not whether a tool can cause damage. The question is whether the tool is used with care." He pointed toward Mara's notebooks. She used care. Sarah's final exhibit was the development map. She showed the proposed emergency access corridor. She showed Brannigan's land purchases. Then she showed that Western Land Evaluation Group had been paid by Brannigan's company. The room became very quiet. The county attorney asked Brannigan's consultant whether he had disclosed that relationship when submitting the complaint. He had not. The panel recessed for 40 minutes. When they returned, the suspension was lifted. The county required Mara to obtain a transport permit, maintain written grazing plans, and submit annual records. But the complaint was dismissed. The panel also referred the undisclosed financial relationship for ethics review. Outside the building, reporters gathered around the firefighters and county officials. Mara avoided them. She found Luis beside her truck. "You won," he said. "We got paperwork. That is often what winning looks like." She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 5 days. By the end of October, Mara had contracts with 11 farms. By December, she had made 3 overdue loan payments. The next spring, she and 6 neighboring landowners formed the Bellwether Grazing Cooperative. They bought shared fencing, a livestock trailer, water tanks, and tracking collars. Nobody got rich. That was never the point. The orchards had cleaner slopes. The vineyards used less herbicide. Native grasses returned in places where grazing was timed carefully. The goats gained weight, raised kids, broke fences, climbed equipment, and continued to behave as if every rule was a personal insult. Mara hired a 17-year-old named Caleb after he showed up 3 Saturdays in a row asking questions. She taught him how to test a fence, how to read a slope, how to recognize when goats had eaten enough, how to look at soil before deciding what the land needed. One morning he asked, "How did you know this was going to work?" Mara looked across the western slope. The grass was green again. Young manzanita shoots were coming back, but thinner and farther apart. Pear blossoms moved in the breeze below. "I didn't," she said. "But you spent everything on the goats." "Almost everything." "That seems crazy." It was. He waited. She checked the water connection on the portable tank. "Sometimes you don't know something will work," she said. "You just know the thing you're doing now won't." Caleb nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. A year after the fire, Mara opened the gate to a new grazing section above the Miller vineyard. The goats moved through in a loose, noisy wave. Otis was still in front, though Mara no longer needed a bucket to make him follow. Luis stood at the fence with his hands in his pockets. "You have more goats now," he said. 86. You wanted none. I remember. You have employees. 1 employee. You have contracts. I have paperwork. You have a cooperative. I have more paperwork. Luis smiled. Below them, the orchard stretched toward the county road. The bank debt was still there. The pump would eventually need replacing. Fire season would return, because it always did. Nothing had become easy. But the farm was no longer waiting to fail. The land had work. The goats had work. Mara had people who would answer when she called, because she had answered when they called. She looked at the next section of dry brush, then at the animals moving toward it. A year earlier, those goats had been unwanted. Too old. Too small. Too difficult. Not profitable enough for milk. Not heavy enough for meat. Now they were reducing fire fuel, feeding soil, protecting orchards, and helping a valley prepare for the one season nobody could afford to ignore. The goats had not changed. What changed was where they were placed. What changed was the work they were given. Mara opened the second gate. The herd moved forward, and the valley got ready for summer.